YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Of course, all my podcast channels. You can always get it on Apple Podcasts, iHeart, iTunes. You just click on Bridges Live. You look for the most recent show, and that would be Talking with the Sarge. Sometimes I don't remember the number that it's in, but if you ever have a question, you can always inbox us anywhere you go, and then I'll give you the number of the show. But you can always find it on some of our social links because it will be on YouTube in itself. So we're talking with the sergeant, and this is Sergeant James Spearman, retired police officer, 33-year veteran, and we are talking about communications and building community with policing and in policing because we have a mistrust, distrust. We are not liking our relationship as individuals and as groups with our law enforcement. You agree with that, James?
I do wholeheartedly.
That's something that we have to correct because let's start with the foreground. We are not able to live in a society without policing.
Not at all.
Okay, so and I think could everyone do you believe it is and here's the thing, there's a disclaimer here on the show. I don't think James will ever want to say he speaks for all police officers. So let's get that straight, please. There's too many police officers, there's too many people around the nation, but he is talking from his heart and from his perspective. So don't get like, well, I heard from James and why don't you do it this way? Sometimes you just need to ask your local police officer, your get involved and talk to the chief or the sheriff and talk to your police officers and ask them, say, listen, I listened to the show Talking with the Sarge, and they were saying this. How do you feel about that? They would love to talk to you. So with that disclaimer, wha- how do you think our separation of policing and black community and just people in general, how did it get separated so much?
From my perspective,
Hmm.
it came from the zero tolerance policies that were enacted by Rudy Giuliani and Governor O'Malley. And from there, it just spiraled
Escalated.
out of control.
Now, we have read and seen, and tell me what you think about this, because your father was also a police officer, correct?
My oldest brother,
Your
yes.
oldest brother.
Mhm.
But you with black police officers throughout history, doing Reconstruction, they hired ex-slaves to help track down people who were going against the law at the time.
Yes.
There were a lot of times they could not go into the courtroom because of the law of the land. You could not go into a courtroom, but they would help these people track down probably all kinds of people, maybe even ex-slaves.
Hmm.
And then before Reconstruction, there were some blacks assisting with whites tracking down slaves. Is that where the historical police come from? Like, was that their inception here in the United States? Or what is the beginning of the police force from what you remember? Or if it was it ever taught in the different academies and things like that?
Yeah, we never got any history lessons regarding blacks in law enforcement. Most of the concepts that we were taught were things that were case law. The basic concept of policing came from Sir Robert Peel out of London, England, and that was brought here. And those concepts and those ideologies were taught to us on a basic concept of policing. And then from there, we learn about case law, or you talk about Tennessee versus Gardner and things of that nature with the fleeing felon law and all of that. Throughout history, unfortunately, for us, most of our lessons and most of the case law that we have received has come from officers making bad decisions. So, touching on the Tennessee versus Gardner concept, that's a fleeing felon law.
Talk about that. What is it? Because this is the insight for us about. So the flea and felon law, was that something again extended from catching slaves?
Well, it wasn't necessarily catching slaves. More so, it came about as a result of all of the bank robberies that were taking place in the Wild Wild West, and then moving fast and forward into the early 20th century, where we had the Great Depression and bank robberies were at an all-time high. Robberies, stagecoach robberies, all those types of things. So officers were allowed to shoot on sight.
Okay. And
So
that was just something that they just stuck with for a long while.
yes.
Now, we also know in 1946 and 45, crime was on a huge rise for two factors. World War II was over. A
Mhm.
lot of people came home. A lot of people couldn't get jobs.
Correct.
And a lot of military people got into bad stuff and crime risen, where it would be a lot of more prostitution, alcohol, gambling,
Mhm.
the whole bit, right? Because so
Mhm.
now proliferating from the military, stealing goods from what the military camps were breaking up and taking goods from there and selling it on the market and so on, so on. So was when did the shoot on sight kind of be held back? When was it like, okay, we got to stop doing this, or was it curtailed? They didn't say
It
stop. Did they?
wasn't stopped, it was curtailed,
Okay,
and that was how the Tennessee versus Gardner case came about.
okay,
Basically, what happened was, to make a long story short, um, officers were allowed to shoot on sight when they were fleeing, what would be considered fleeing felons. And it was just a straight across the board fleeing felon law. So you had officers who were taking it too far for shooting people for shoplifting. So back in those days, grand theft was anything $300 or more.
more.
So in other words, or you could have auto theft. So you could have that auto theft was big. So you had officers that were shooting at people for stealing cars. They were shooting at people for stealing more than $300. It wasn't necessarily a dangerous felony.
Those
They
three
were,
hundred
they were,
dollars.
it was a felony, so they were shooting them rather than trying to capture them. So from there, the case Tennessee versus Gardner came in, and it curtailed that back to violent felonies. So we still have a fleeing felon law, but it has to be a violent felony, such as an armed robbery, armed carjacking, murder, attempted murder, things like that.
You know, as a kid, we were told never to run away from a fat cop. If if he looked like he was in shape, you could probably give him a chase. But if he's fat, he's probably going to shoot you because he's not running. It was just a kind. It seems sick and sad, but that was something we just kind of knew as like as an 8-year-old, 7-year-old. You know, I just thought of that. Like, don't run away from a fat cop because that white guy will shoot you. You know, if he's in shape, he might chase you down. But if he's not, that flat footing, he's not running. Right. So that's very telling. This is actually the first time I've ever heard of the flea and felon law and how it was just implemented for so many decades, and it so when did the when doing the Tennessee law, what year was that?
I'd have to Google that real.
Okay, but you learned about this when you got into the academy, when you got
Yeah.
into education. So it was something like this is why, this is the history.
Yes.
Now, we all throughout the country, there's not a radio station that you can't turn on that is a talk radio or a public announcement that we're not talking about the rise of crime, the rise of this, the rise of that group, the rise. Now, are they sensationalizing so they can put more cops on the streets? Or is it just crime just going up? Is it a cyclical thing is like here in Maryland, we've talked about this before on the other show. Baltimore City, it, there 300 crimes, 300 fatal shootings a year, not just crime. We're talking about shootings. What's the average that a city would like to be at? And that seems sick because I've been in some areas of the country, Midwest, upper Midwest, where less population. And if they have 4 a year, they're lucky.
Yes. I mean, it depends on the population. It just depends on the size of the city. I mean, the murder rate in Baltimore, I'm sure they would love to get it down to around 150 or somewhere around there. I don't want to use the word acceptable, but
right. Because no death is, again, it's almost like we literally have to put it out there for people. This is a disclaimer: no death is acceptable.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems like if we don't say it, they're like, they would like to just kill 100. No, stop. Don't be silly, right?
No, not at all.
No death is acceptable. But when you were on the force in Annapolis, what was a number they kept trying to? It's almost like an accident number for a construction site. We don't want to have 0 accidents, right? What are the murder rate? What's the murder rate they want to get it down
to? We always strive for 200. 2. Yeah, Annapolis. We don't have that kind of crime. I mean, we have violent crime, but our homicide rate is not that big. If it's double digits, that's a problem.
Okay.
But I mean, it's what most people don't understand is that in our society, death is inevitable, or meaning a homicide is inevitable because just human nature in general has nothing to do with crime. There are all sorts of reasons why people commit suicide. I mean, or homicide. And the thing about it is, it just comes down to motive. The drug trade is the thing that's exacerbated in the gangs. The activity of the higher level gang activity is the driving force now. But earlier on, before all of these things came about, it was usually domestic related or dispute related, revenge type things that fueled homicides. But now that the drug trade has made its way into our society and the gang activity is there, and now we have the new push, which is mental health. They all feed off of each other.
You and I, we both know mental health is a huge aspect to being a healthy community. Mm-hmm. Now let's go with the gangs, and if we slowly do this, the gangs, the organizations, we have to say, right? Because the mob was never considered a gang. The Italian mob was never considered a gang, but a crime syndicate, right? An organized crime syndicate.
Organized crime, yes.
Because all cultures, and I will say that all cultures have mobs.
Yes.
They all have a crime syndicate. I don't think there's a culture on the planet or wherever you come from that does not have a crime syndicate.
Correct.
And if I'm wrong, I want someone to call me, text me, yell at me, Paul, you're wrong. The Mormons don't have a crime. Bull crap. Because they had a crime syndicate in the West when they were helping building that railroad. So they were strong arming people too, right? They just pray over you after they do it. So, what about the Quakers? Well, I'm sure they had their little taste too. You know what I mean? So we cannot hold anyone off the board of crime syndicate. So the question is there some sense of, in your head, could we ever not have crime syndicates?
The only way that we could ever be able to totally eliminate crime syndicates would be for the government to make good decisions that would not create a black market.
And there goes the other crime syndicate. And yes, I said it. The government is a crime syndicate in itself because they have splinter groups within the government. You have
Mhm.
different agencies who work in darkness, and you guys know who you are, that push and pull and splinter things so you get certain things done for yourself.
Mhm.
I mean, Hoover did it. Hoover would send people out, and that was that FBI boys. They would send people out and bust heads, and they'd be like, "It was this group that did it," and now they would bust heads, say it was this group, and then arrest the people. I mean, those were just facts, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think that's why we have gangs. Is the crime syndicate became so untouchable, or touch very little, that anyone says if we become big enough, they can't touch us too. Now, I know a lot of we call the underworld, and that's their theory, and it actually works. They know that they're dealing, these big drug dealers, there's people, the cops know they're dealing, the precinct knows they're dealing, but as long as they feed them something, they will stay out of jail. Now, I don't want you to talk on telling anyone, but have you witnessed that and heard that yourself?
Not directly in Annapolis, but
Okay.
I've heard other areas, and I've been told that. I have never witnessed that firsthand. But yeah, I believe that exists. I mean, um, that's what the money is for. You know, they pay cops off, they pay judges off, they pay prosecutors off. I mean, our history is riddled with those stories. So I can. It's hard to believe that it's not happening now.
Right.
It's no way possible to think that that's not happening now.
So with it's almost so with all that information and all the things that happens in the good and the bad, it's almost seems understandable why our community can has a hard time trusting who and the what.
Yes,
So
yes.
so now we're stuck. Now we're back to that original question. How do we build a community when we really don't trust someone unless we get to know each other?
That's true. You have to, the officers have to be out of the cars. They have to put the computers down. They have to put the cell phones down. They have to get out and actually hold a conversation with someone and uh, build that relationship and learn how to police the proper way. Uh, Being a police officer doesn't mean that you have to lock everybody up for everything that they do wrong. It doesn't mean that you have to give them a ticket for every traffic violation that occurs. You have to implement the human equation, and you have to learn how to give someone a break and figure for yourself whether or not they deserve a break. There are some people that don't deserve breaks, but there are some people that are in dire circumstances. They might make a bad decision or a bad situation, and you look at the situation and you judge for yourself. And if you give someone a break who doesn't deserve it, and the guys, I've told this before, if you feel like you give somebody a break and they didn't deserve it, and you find out they did it and they didn't deserve it, they didn't get over on you because they're going to do something stupid again.
Right, right.
And they're not going to just, they got over on you that one time. They're not going to say, "Oh, I just got over on this cop. Let me just stop. I'm not never going to do wrong again." No, they're going to keep on going. And matter of fact, it will probably encourage them to continue that behavior because they think they're going to be smart and they're going to think that they've gotten away with something.
The Hasidic community that I know of in New York, in Muncie, New York, and in Rockland County, and I can be very specific because I lived around there and grew up around there. The Hasidic community, which is an Orthodox Jewish community, if most people don't know, the Hasidic community have their own schools. They have their own. We call it actually Little Israel because they have their own everything: the stores, the schools, the hospitals, the EMTs, the fire department, and police. Now, they work only within their own community. I don't know how, I'm not privy to that type of mayor conversation, how they were able to get their own cars, their own situation, but they police themselves. And if it, not that they call their own police force to come work through a situation that they're having within their community. If there's a shooting, yes, another, the what you call the state police, county police will come in, but they're working hand in hand with the Hasidic community, with their representatives that are policing or securing, I don't know, whatever word you want to use, their community. Is that possible through all communities, or you don't think that's possible at all?
I think it's possible if people are willing to put in the effort and put in the work. One of the things that I've always admired with the Jewish community is that they invest heavily into their own neighborhoods.
They really do.
They invest heavily into education. They invest heavily into their faith. They don't deviate from their faith. They don't do and or maybe. There's no gray area when it comes to the Jewish faith. And they invest heavily into their families, and they invest heavily into the well-being of their economy. And those are the things that, when you talk about Black Wall Street and things of that nature, that's what we used to have. And when it was taken away, no one picked up the torch and tried to build again. I admire the Jewish community because everything was taken away from them in Europe and all over the world. And when they came here, they, wherever they ended up, they built a new community, and they continued.
Well, the one thing I think, and when we talk about Black Wall Street, and just recently was the 100-year memorial conversation with it. No one here in the United States ever burned down a Jewish community.
Absolutely not.
So the war thing that they happened over in Europe and through Poland and through Germany and the other places, they were pawns being used for an excuse, right? But when they were able to get here to the United States, you're right, they did pick up their stuff and say, we're going to rebuild this again. And then they fought for their own land rights over in Gaza and in Israel, right, for the section. So the Black community are so traumatized of being, because throughout time, even prior to Reconstruction, if we did something, they burn it up,
yes,
tear it down. And even in 1985, they bombed a Philly town.
yes.
I mean,
yes.
I think we're the only culture in the world that's been bombed by our own government.
Yes.
They dropped a bomb in Philly.
Yes. A lot of people forgot about that.
But I don't think a lot of people even know about it. 1985. Yeah. Look it up, people.
About. You're right.
I mean, it's scary. I mean, that scares the bejeebus out of anybody going, okay, we just need to keep our mouth shut and keep on moving. But that's not work. That doesn't work for us. We can't, because it hurts us.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, in making a comparison of the two cultures, they don't have the history of slavery as far as this country is concerned. Right. You know, we were just coming out of slavery. We were just learning to become educated. We were just learning to build businesses and be able to do the things we needed to do to sustain ourselves. So they had that advantage coming here. They were already educated. They were already a good number of the Jews that were persecuted were already bankers.
Right.
They were already doctors. They were already lawyers.
They had trained. Yeah.
So when they came here, they already had the training. So, and we hadn't attained that yet. You know, I mean, in my family, I'm the second generation college, you know.
Yeah, my generation, I'm 54. My generation my mother was college graduate, but back in the 40s, it wasn't many. Mm-hmm. It wasn't many.
Not at all.
So going back to a community, we have shootings in every city, every town, everywhere.
Yes.
And in the Black community, when a shooting happens, we know who shot who for what reason. We know. We know if we look at the body on the ground, we're like, oh yeah, right?
Yes.
But we don't say anything. That's not helping us either. We ask, you police officers go around and say, okay, who saw somebody? And everyone's like, 180, gone. So I'm not saying nothing.
Yes.
Well, that's not helping either.
Well, the problem is the reason why the shootings are occurring and the reason why they are skyrocketing is because people in the Black community have decided to police themselves because they don't trust law enforcement and they don't trust the criminal justice system. Why in the world should I put myself and my family in danger and testify against somebody and everybody knows who I am? Only for this guy to get 5-6 years or through some plea agreement or his brother come after my family or something like that. And so we have a real live struggle and you have a lot of guys and a lot of kids who want to fit in with this snitches get stitches.
I was just going to say that. I think I've never heard it in any other community except for the community. Snitches get stitches. Like that is something, I don't care if you lived in whatever city in Timbuktu to New York, that is a true statement. Snitches get stitches.
Yes. Yeah, and the only way we're not going to be able to police ourselves out of this situation. I mean, at one point in time, I had 8 nephews in jail. You know, that's devastating to a family. You know, until we start getting our kids into education other than sports, we start talking about education. We start talking about getting into markets that are going to sustain us. Too many of us are talking about going to get a job, being able to work and things of that nature. And they're not talking about entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Even in the areas where they just want a job, they're not talking about jobs that are sustainable.
Correct.
We're not paying attention to what's coming over the horizon. If you pay attention, the robot is replacing a lot of jobs, and it doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter what culture you are. So you're going to have to start looking in the areas of robotics, the STEM program, cybersecurity. Definitely, if you really want to get into something that's going to be cybersecurity is going to be the industry.
You know, I was talking to another guest on this week, and it is financial literacy. It is economic separation. I mean,
Yes.
that is the true separation or segregation is economics and finance. It's really what it is.
Yes. When I talk to so many young people, they have no clue about credit. They don't respect credit. Not that they don't, it's not that they don't respect it in general, is that they don't understand what kind of impact it can have on their life because so many of them are not at that level. You know, they don't understand the value of paying mortgage versus rent. They don't understand credit cards. They don't understand the quality of life that they can develop just being able to have good credit. And another thing is any job worth having, there's 2 things that you must be able to do regardless of your education, regardless of your intelligence, regardless of what your skill set is. If you can't pass a drug test and you don't have good credit, you're not going to get the job.
You're not going to get the job. And, you know, when the oil boom was happening in the western part of North Dakota, this was the ad that came across the radio. If you can pass a drug test and sign your name, we have an $80,000 bonus, signing bonus for a $160,000 job.
Wow.
That was the ad. That was it. If you can, and it started out, and I will never forget it because I was entrepreneur. I was working. I had this gig I was doing, and I was driving out there in the western part of the state, and I was like, I'm doing something wrong. I'm hustling and moving, and it's if I can sign my name
Yes.
and pass a drug test.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. Yes.
I was like, wow. But then, that's but you're right. There's a lot of people that just can't pass a drug test, and we legalize marijuana
Yes.
for medicinal purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But we did not legalize it as much as that I can hire you because you have what you call one of those legal cards.
Mm-hmm.
You still got to pass my drug test.
Yes. Yes.
People did not think about that at all. There were tons of people that got fired because once they legalized it in the state, like i.e. Colorado and all these other states, companies were like, okay, we have a drug test. And hundreds of people got fired.
Yes. Well, our country is driven by two things. Number one is money, and second is litigation. And however you want to put it in there, the insurance, you throw that in there somewhere, however wherever you stand.
Well, I can't have you driving my vehicle. If I'm a construction guy, I don't care what it is. I can't have you drive my vehicle and you could be high.
Correct.
Legally, I don't care. Legally, unlegally, you could be high. As an insurance company, I'm not paying for that as an insurance company. I'm not doing it.
Not at all. Not at all. And if you were to get into an accident to the level where they did feel they had to test you or take your blood, one of the things that people don't understand is that if you get into an accident along these lines, if you get into an accident to the level of which you hurt someone in a life-threatening, to the level of a life-threatening injury, the police have the right to take your blood.
Yeah.
You don't have a question. If they have any suspicion that you're under the influence, they can get a court order and take your blood. You don't get the right to refuse.
In Germany, they do it right there on the street.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, in Germany, they do it right there. And there is no refusal because you either do it by force, but they'll do it right there. As soon as there's an accident, people are rolling up their arms.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is without question.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But yeah. Yeah. Germany has always been a lot more strict. Their law enforcement is a lot more strict than ours, and their government backs them fully.
Yeah, I think it has more to do with the European travel with different, I'm not going to say the word terrorists, but different factions moving through the different countries. We just don't have that type of flow. We have people from Jersey, but we don't have people from Turkey coming in and out. You know what I mean?
Right. That's true.
And then if we have borders on every state, we might have that issue. If there was like you need a passport to come to Maryland from Delaware, it would be an issue. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, until we start really taking a hard look at the things that are really important and having an understanding of cause and effect. I mean, people don't seem to understand that concept anymore. Of cause and effect. I had a young man who I arrested for a violation, brought him into the station. I started searching him and I pulled out a big bag of weed and he turned and he laughed at me and said, "Oh, I know you wish you could charge me with that." And I said, "No." I said, "But guess what? You won't be able to get a job. Any job worth having where they pay good money, you won't get it." And the look on his face, he was like, "Are you kidding?" I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm dead serious. You are not going to get any decent job. Two things they're going to check is your credit and your drug history
and your arrest record."
Yeah. Well, there's some jobs that your arrest record doesn't count as much. It just depends on what crime you're talking about.
Well, there's a young lady, I have a show called You Be the Judge. It's with Marilyn Pierre, attorney at law. She's actually running for the judgeship in Montgomery County, and then Judge Claudia Barber. The show we have on Wednesdays, I would never forget the story because it broke my heart. There was a young lady that Marilyn was working with as a young person. They
Mhm.
got charged with a crime when they were 13 years old from a candy bar. The store pressed charges, right?
Mhm.
No jail time, but they pressed charges.
Mhm.
She has now a master's degree in engineering. She can't get a job because of the charge that happened at 13.
You can't get that expunged.
There's a time. She's only 20 plus years old, so there's a time thing that has to wait. So
Wow.
it's affecting her. Yeah, graduated high school, honors in college, master's degree in engineering. Can't get a job because they're looking at her arrest record.
So they go into juvenile records now?
That's like I
Because I
said,
thought they were
yeah.
supposed to be sealed, at least,
You're asking. I'm not an attorney, and I feel sad that it is. No, maybe she was. Maybe she was 15 and they charged her at 16 as a whatever charge, and she wasn't a juvenile. So,
Okay.
but it hurts. Even a candy bar. It was a candy bar. It was a candy bar. You know what I mean? I mean, she didn't do anything since. She hasn't done anything, whatever. But it's hurting her career path until, right? So however long she's got to wait, however how much money she's got to spend to get it expunged, whatever
Mhm.
all those things are, it was just a candy bar.
Those are the things that's part of the reason why I say the criminal justice system is broken. Because how is justice being served by keeping this young lady from fulfilling her dream? It was a candy bar, and it happened many years ago, and it didn't hurt society at large. But what's hurting society at large is not allowing her to fulfill her dream and allowing her to use her training and her passion to the betterment of our society. That was what our criminal justice system was supposed to do. We're supposed to, if you're found guilty, you're supposed to pay your debt to a society, and then you're supposed to be able to go on and live your life as long as you stay on the straight and narrow.
But that's not the case.
No, we're finding that that's not the case. And then we're finding the extreme because we're seeing other people who were, like I said before, people who have shot and killed other people who have actually taken a life and they've only served like 5 or 6 years. And then you have people who dealt drugs who didn't necessarily directly kill anybody who served 15, 20 years. So I've never understood how judges come about
With their
rendering
sentences.
the sentencing that they do.
Now that's actually that's got to be hard on a police officer when it comes to a shooting, and he's out in X amount of years. That's got to be hard on a police officer who arrested him, or
It is.
anyone who did the arrest, whether it be the task team, the task force, because you think about it, right? A person has killed someone. Now they're looking for him. Now there's a detective, right, in charge of the case.
Mm-hmm.
The detective has figured out of a couple of months of investigation, right? So you're paying a detective salary. He is working probably a caseload for however how long, couple of months. He finds out this person's at X place. Now they put together a task force to get it, right? Like, because they want to be protected as they go in to get this person.
Yes.
So now there's 6 armed officers going into a place, if not maybe the SWAT team to on call to just in case. So for this one person, we're talking roughly probably about $3 million.
Could be that much, yeah. Easy.
Easy. And that's just the paychecks.
Because you got to factor in the overtime.
Right.
There's going to be overtime.
There's overtime, right? So we get him. Boom. Woo. No one's hurt. No one's shot. We bring him in. He gets put in the clink. Now I'm sure he's going to have a trial.
Mm-hmm.
Let's throw another couple of million at it. Attorney's fees, DA fees, judge, blah, blah, blah. After all that, he gets out in 6 years.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't, something's
Not a
off.
good investment, is it?
No, because if you had told me, hey, Doc, I got this investment for you, and here's how much you got to spend, and I'll be like, what's my return?
Mhm.
And you say, if you give me if you give me $350,000, I give you back $10.
Right.
I'd be like, James, that's you'd be like, that's the deal. I'm telling you,
Mhm.
it's a steal.
Yeah.
I'm I, I,
And the guy who gets the 6 years, he has no problem doing the 6 years. He thinks it's funny
right.
on top of it all.
And if not, when he
Right.
gets out, he's probably going to shoot a kill again.
Well, going back to my original point, so now not only how the officers feel, how do you think the family feels when they're sitting there looking at them?
Mhm. When we talk about developing communication with better community, there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of feelings to unpack. There's a lot of emotions to unpack. There's a lot of just pain.
Yes,
And we're not unpacking it. We're pushing it. We're kicking the ball down the road. And it just turns into a snowball.
yes, and it's still occurring as we speak. Until we start to unravel a lot of these problems that are connected. Um, the Baltimore is a prime example. You have food deserts, um, you have gang activity, you have school issues, you have trauma within the families because of all the shootings and the homicides. I mean, we see the news reports of the homicides that occur, but I guarantee you for every homicide that they cover, it was probably 20 or 25 shootings that didn't get covered in the news media. So it's just a spiraling domino effect.
Going back to building a community that's better, we've talked about other communities and how they have done it. And is it the possibility, can other communities do the same thing? Specifically, the Black community, if they took the model of the city community, what we talked about, do you think they will? You think it's possible that the large community at a whole would just totally open up their whole thing and say, "Well, this is what I've been waiting for, and now I get to tell on them, and now I get to clean my neighborhood. Now I get to pick up my trash. Now I get to, make sure those guys are not in the corner. Now I get to." You think it would be like, "I've been waiting for this," or you think it's just something they would still kind of be contentious with?
There are so many dynamics that are
Yeah.
feeding this. You'd have to attack them all at once. It can't be one thing versus another. It can't be this idea and then that idea. All of the ideas would have to come out all at once. And we'd have to address all of the issues as much as we could. And one of the things that we could start with would be education. We have to get the Saturday schools going.
Yeah.
We have to get the clergy to come out of their churches and into the street, all of them together on the same sheet of music. We need to have all these professionals that have the knowledge and the know-how, almost like a career fair. And we need the therapists to come out there. We need the doctors. We need the nurses. We need anybody and everybody that you can think of. We need the police officers to come out. We need the teachers to come out. We need to have the families to come out. And I would like to see more of a summit come together where we can identify the rival crews and the rival gang members and maybe to a peace treaty, because you're not going to be able to, you have to stop it somewhere.
Right.
Something has to give, and you just have to stop it, because if you don't stop the wars that's going on in the street, it's going to be all for naught. We have to have programs for the people that are coming out of jail. We have to have programs for them to get into. We have to have programs that are going to be sustainable, you cannot, one of my complaints about the social programs that the governments always implement, they only have a 4 or 5 year time window. Well, how can you take 5 years to
Right.
solve a generational issue? You coming in and I don't know you and you're going to give me 5 years and 5 years of worth of resources, but you never addressed the fact that I had to grow up without my mother because she was in jail, or
Right.
I had to grow up without my father because the rival gang killed him.
Mm-hmm.
These things are generational, and we have to stop. We have to stop the bleeding. You can't pull the bullet out without stopping the bleeding. Otherwise, it really makes no sense. So you have to get a tourniquet, and you have to stop the bleeding, and then you have to address the wounds.
And and I love the plan. That is a great plan, and I think it can be implemented. I really do believe it can be. But if it doesn't, you guys get blamed. The officers get blamed. The chief gets blamed. The head of the department gets blamed. The mayor gets blamed. And it's not a single fault when, like you said, it's attacking everything all at once. So how can we blame only the few? It's like blaming a head coach because the team didn't score 15, they lost they didn't score well. The team didn't score well. The coach isn't playing.
Right.
But they're like, well, it's the preparation. It's that I don't like him, and all this. It's very childish in a way. You know what I mean? And I think even something as simple as a sports team blaming a head coach, I think it's a mental issue because if my players can't adhere to me, I may not like you, but you got to try my system. It's almost like I've been in the military. There were people, sergeants, and I'll never forget this first sergeant. He was racist as all get out,
Mm-hmm.
but I still performed for him because
Yeah.
it's not about him.
Yes. That's part of the mindset that needs to be created with the families. I coached football, I coached basketball, and the parents would come up to me and treat me like I was one of their employees. They acted like they paid me to coach their child. And if their child wasn't performing, if they weren't on the field, they made it my problem. And they gave me what for. And then when I would say, well, your child's not doing this, your child's attitude is this. I taught your child how to do this, but he wasn't paying attention. And if he doesn't come to practice, or if he doesn't try, and if he doesn't listen, what it is that you want from me? I think we've gotten into a situation where America has unrealistic expectations, and they put them on the wrong people. It's not the police officer's job to raise someone else's child. We're here to help, but it's not my job to come into your home and be your child's father for 30 seconds. That's not my job. I'll be glad to talk to him, and I'll be glad to try to point him on the straight and narrow, but he doesn't know me. She doesn't know me. So then, over time, and I'll tell you, it is powerful because I did have this one little girl who was craving attention, and she wanted it from an older man. And one day her mother reported her missing, and I actually took the missing person report. I went around the neighborhood, I found her, and she and I struck up a rapport. And I talked to her, and she wanted that father figure. She wanted the attention of an older man. And I even threatened to come to her school, and she pulled my card. She's like, okay, come to my school. And I was like, ooh, what do I do with this one? Because most kids like, I don't want you to come to my school. Right. I don't want you to come to my school. But now she pulled my card, and I had to be a man of my word, but whenever she wanted my attention, she would just not come home. And I knew where to go to pick her up, so I would go there and I would spend an hour with her, and I would talk to her and take her back, and she'd be fine. But
again, that's a mental health issue that you talk about all the time. There's therapy that needs to happen. I'm glad you were there, James, but you're not the therapist.
No, I agree. But when I took that oath,
yeah,
my oath is to do what needs to be done to help. I was glad that she sought my help rather than some older guy who would have had other means.
Right. And that we've talked about this oath before. And recently, Monday was a sad day for me for Memorial Day. I'm not a celebrator. I am not into the cookouts and whatever it's going to happen, because to me it's a remembrance. It's a funeral.
Yeah.
I don't see how many people who are celebrating on their mother's death. Like, mother died last year. Woohoo! Barbecue. I don't see people doing that. So why would you do that for a person who took an oath, and the many who lost their lives because they served and took that honor and oath? Where does the celebration come in? Because you're not celebrating the death, you're celebrating your day off.
Correct.
Okay, or buying a new car at 0 point financing because it's Memorial Weekend. I mean, I there I know it's commercialized and it bothers me and it really upsets me. So
No, it should bother you. And it goes back to the schools. It goes back to our education system. Our kids are not being taught the meaning of holidays. They don't, they see it as a holiday, and they see it as a day to get out of school, but they're not given assignments in recognition of these. When I was in school, when you took when Veterans Day or Memorial Day, we had to write a report or an essay, and we had to pick somebody, whether it be a veteran or, in this case, Memorial Day, someone who gave their life for the service of this country. We had to write about that person and be able to talk about it. Those are the things that we were expected to do. Now, my kids, when they get a holiday, they don't have any homework. When I got Christmas break, I had more homework.
right, because you had time to do it.
Yes, yeah. And it hit me because one of my daughters came home and I said, "Do you have any homework?" And she said, "No." I didn't believe her. I thought she was kidding me. And I called the teacher. She said, "Oh, no, we don't give homework on holidays." And I was like, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
wow. Okay, yeah. All right. And then when we hang up the phone, we're like, "This is what I want you to do on this day off. This is what we're going to do. You're going to get this, this, and this. It's not going to be much, but you're going to do it for me."
Yes. Yes. And then now you're the bad guy, because nobody else has to do it. I don't see why I have to do it. But now that they're older, now I see why you made me do it. I see why you said this, and I see why you said that. And so many kids don't have fathers who are planting those seeds. And one of the sayings that I've developed: how can you expect kids to have expectations when they don't live a life of expectation?
That's right. Love it, James. Talking with the Sarge. If you guys have any questions for the Sarge, you can actually inbox us, email us, or just put it into our comments and anywhere of our social media, and we'll get back to it next week. If it's a question, maybe the Sarge will answer it right away. But if not, we can just hold it on over to the next Thursday at 6 p.m. talking with the Sarge. God bless you, brother. I'm glad you're here with us, and I'm glad you're doing what you do every day, man. I love it.
Love you, man.
You guys have a good night. God bless, and everybody be safe, be happy, and be active in your community. That's what I want you to be. Be active, not act up.
Be active.
Be active, right. Take it easy, brother.